It is a quiet but exhausting cycle.
Mhm.
You work hard, you build, you stumble, and you find yourself starting over. Why is it that the more we earn, the more elusive true financial stability seems to become?
It is a question that haunts so many people
Mhm.
precisely because the struggle often happens entirely in secret.
Right. Well, welcome to the deep dive. Today, you are going to explore a phenomenon that affects almost everyone, yet remains largely unspoken.
Yeah, it really is.
We are looking at what actually changes in our behavior when money is involved and why our own deeply ingrained habits so often sabotage our income over time.
Absolutely.
And to help you understand this, we have curated a fascinating stack of sources for you. We are not just looking at spreadsheets today.
No, definitely not.
Instead, you are going to explore everything from academic research on family financial planning to behavioral economics theories on lifestyle inflation.
Right. And even philosophical essays examining how we perceive time and practical frameworks designed specifically for anyone who is just, tired of the financial restart.
It is a profoundly complex landscape to navigate.
It is. And what we will be doing today is calmly unpacking the deeply human emotions, the social comparisons, and the psychological adaptations that dictate your financial reality.
We are looking at the invisible forces that shape your bank account and, by extension, your life.
hmm
Okay, so let's unpack this. To understand why people constantly start over, we first have to completely dismantle what might be the most common societal illusion out there.
Oh, the big one.
Right. The belief that a high income equals wealth. You see a big paycheck, and it is so natural to assume financial security.
It is. I mean, we all do it.
But the research tells a completely different and somewhat startling story.
It does. And a magnificent place to begin dismantling that illusion is with the strict, unyielding definitions provided by the thinker and entrepreneur Naval Ravikant.
Ah, yes.
In the source materials analyzing his philosophy, he makes a crucial fundamental distinction between three concepts that society constantly and dangerously confuses.
Right, and those are wealth, money, and status.
Exactly. According to the text, wealth is having assets that earn while you sleep.
Okay.
It is the factory, the computer program, the investment portfolio.
Yeah.
It is owning equity, the actual upside of a system.
So it's something working for you.
Right. Money, on the other hand, is simply the social medium, the agreed-upon fiction that we use to transfer that wealth and time between each other. And status.
Status is just your visible place in the social hierarchy. That's it.
Wow. That distinction changes absolutely everything.
It really does.
Because if you are just focusing on money, you are missing the underlying mechanics completely.
Yeah.
The source points out the profound difference between renting out your time versus actually owning systems.
This is key.
You could be a highly paid doctor, a corporate lawyer, or a senior executive bringing in a massive, eye-watering salary.
Right. Huge income.
But at the end of the day, if you stop working, the money stops flowing. You are still renting your time for money.
It's just that the rent you command is higher.
Exactly. The fundamental vulnerability remains. Yeah, the best case scenario with trading time for money is that you become well off, but according to this framework, you will never truly build wealth without equity.
Right.
Which brings us to a foundational concept found in both our Liber texts and Bondora sources.
Okay, let's get into that.
It's the stark mathematical difference between cash flow, which is your income, and net worth, which is the snapshot of your assets minus your liabilities.
So income is just money in motion.
Exactly. It is a river flowing through your life. Net worth is the reservoir. It is what is actually left over when the flow stops.
I love that. The river and the reservoir. And the Bondora source gives a fantastic, really eye-opening example of this that brings it down to earth.
Yes, the Sam and Morgan comparison.
Right. They contrast two hypothetical individuals. Let's look at Sam first.
Okay.
Sam has a tremendous income. He drives his beautiful, expensive car, lives in a sprawling house in a great neighborhood, and from the outside, he radiates success.
He has high status.
Exactly, high status. But he has massive debt. If you look at Sam's assets, maybe his house and car are worth $300,000, but he owes $331,000 in mortgages, luxury car loans, and maxed out credit cards.
Wow.
So Sam, despite all the visual markers of success, actually has a negative net worth of $31,000.
And then you have Morgan, or Sarah, from the LibreText example, who represent the complete opposite end of the spectrum.
Right.
They might have a much lower, very average income, say $45,000 or $60,000 a year.
Okay.
But they graduated without student loans. They have $12,000 sitting quietly in savings, and they drive a 10-year-old paid-off car.
So their net worth is positive.
Exactly. Despite earning significantly less than Sam, they're in a mathematically stronger, far more resilient financial position than the high owner who is just drowning in liabilities.
It really makes you rethink what you are actually seeing when you look at someone's lifestyle.
Completely.
What's fascinating here is the sheer data backing this up. The Ledger Theory source cites Federal Reserve data exploring the wealth gap between someone earning $150,000 a year and someone earning $200,000 a year.
Right, a $50,000 difference.
Yeah. Now, you would naturally think the person making $50,000 more every single year would have vastly more wealth accumulated.
You'd assume so.
But the data shows that the median net worth increase between those two brackets is disproportionately small.
Wow.
The source explains that marginal returns to income diminish rapidly if there isn't deliberate, structured investment.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to calmly observe why society conflates income with wealth so seamlessly.
Right. Why do we do this?
It ultimately comes down to our biology.
Really?
Yeah, we are highly visual creatures. We can easily see a salary manifested in a luxury SUV sitting in a driveway.
Oh, totally. Or a tailored suit or a sprawling, meticulously landscaped house.
Exactly. Those are highly visible markers of income and, returning to the earlier definition, status.
Right.
But we cannot see a healthy investment portfolio. We cannot look at someone and see the absence of high-interest debt. True wealth is largely invisible to the observer, which makes it incredibly hard for society to model or aspire to. We mimic what we can see.
Here's where it gets really interesting, and I want to introduce an analogy to help visualize this.
Go for it.
Imagine you have a bucket with a hole in the bottom of it.
Okay.
If you get a raise at work, it's like turning up the faucet. The water is pouring in faster, it's splashing louder, and it feels like you are succeeding because there is so much thrilling activity and movement.
Right.
But the bucket isn't actually filling up. The water level stays the exact same because the hole just accommodated the extra flow.
That is such a perfect way to look at it.
So considering that, why does it feel so profoundly counterintuitive to us that someone making $200,000 a year might actually be in a more fragile position than someone making $60,000?
Well, it feels counterintuitive because our brains naturally assume that a larger influx of resources equates to a larger reserve of safety. But as your bucket analogy perfectly illustrates, flow does not equal retention. The fragility comes from the rigid structure built around that income.
What do you mean by rigid structure?
A $200,000 earner often builds a massive lifestyle infrastructure. Expensive jumbo mortgages, high monthly car leases, country club dues, private school tuitions.
Oh, I see.
That entire infrastructure requires a continuous, uninterrupted flow of that exact high income just to avoid total collapse.
Yeah.
If the $200,000 earner loses their job, the financial pressure is immediate and catastrophic. But the $60,000 earner with zero debt and low fixed costs has far more psychological and structural resilience if the flow of income suddenly stops.
Which leads us into a deeply psychological question.
Okay.
If a high income doesn't organically create wealth, what is actually happening in our brains when we get a raise?
Right.
Why does that hole in the bucket always seem to widen perfectly to match the new flow of water?
To understand that, we have to transition from the math to the mind.
Let's do it.
We look at the ledger theory and the psychology of the trap. The source introduces the concept of lifestyle inflation, often called lifestyle creep.
I've heard that term.
And it is vital, absolutely essential, that you understand this is not a moral failing.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it is not a lack of personal discipline or a character flaw.
Right.
It is a highly documented structural and behavioral phenomenon.
Yeah.
It operates with almost mechanical precision in the human mind.
Right. The source spends a lot of time on hedonic adaptation, which is essentially the brain's psychological reset button. They cite a massive, fascinating study from the UK that tracked 35,000 households over a decade.
Huge sample size.
Yeah, and the findings are staggering. They found that 68% of the happiness boost you get from a positive income event like getting a major promotion or a big raise completely dissipates within 18 months.
68%. That is wild.
Yeah, but the elevated spending that you initiated when you got that raise remains permanently.
And that is the quiet tragedy of hedonic adaptation. Think about the physical reality of it. The luxury vehicle you buy today smells wonderful. The leather is soft. The engine is powerful. But give it 18 months, and it eventually feels exactly like the economy car you used to drive.
It's just normal now.
Exactly. It just becomes the metal box that takes you to the grocery store. The psychological payoff the dopamine hit, reverts entirely to the baseline mean.
But you still have the bill.
Exactly. The $900 monthly payment is a permanent fixture in your cash flow. To recapture that fleeting feeling of pleasure, your brain demands another upgrade, creating an exhausting, endless loop of escalating consumption without any proportional gain in lasting satisfaction.
And it is not just happening in the isolation of your own mind.
No, definitely not.
The ledger theory also brings in social comparison theory. As your income rises, your reference group entirely shifts.
Right, who you compare yourself to.
Let's look at the corporate attorney example from the text. When a young lawyer gets a job at a prestigious, high-powered firm, they don't just get a higher salary deposited into their checking account. They are suddenly immersed in a completely new social culture. The baseline for what is considered a normal apartment, a normal weekend vacation, or even a normal place to eat lunch completely changes.
Yes, and the neuroscience behind this is deeply compelling.
What does it show?
Neuroimaging shows that the brain's reward circuit actually fires significantly stronger for relative gains, meaning doing better than your immediate peers than for absolute gains.
Wait, really?
Yeah. So the young attorney isn't necessarily buying a luxury watch or a downtown loft to aggressively show off.
Okay.
They are buying what simply feels normal for their new environment. It is a slow, highly rationalized creep.
Wow.
You start adopting the daily consumption habits of the people standing next to you in the elevator, and because everyone else is doing it, it feels like a mandatory cost of living rather than a discretionary luxury.
And compounding all of this is something called present bias. The source describes this as the deep human tendency to value $10 today infinitely more than $100 tomorrow.
Yes, immediate gratification.
Even if the future payoff is mathematically massive, our brains genuinely struggle to prioritize a distant, abstract future over an immediate, tangible reward sitting right in front of us.
It's just how we're wired.
Right. It acts as an absolute accelerant on lifestyle inflation.
When you combine those three forces, hedonic adaptation, neutralizing your joy, social comparison raising your baseline, and present bias demanding immediate gratification, you end up with what behavioral finance calls the golden handcuffs.
Oh, I've heard that phrase.
It's the incredibly common phenomenon of getting trapped in a career or a job you might intensely dislike, simply because your fixed lifestyle costs have escalated so high that you can no longer afford to take a pay cut.
Even for something more meaningful.
Exactly. Your lifestyle infrastructure begins to dictate your career choices, rather than your career facilitating your life.
So, looking at all these psychological mechanisms, if our brains are biologically hardwired to constantly reset our happiness baseline, and we are neurologically programmed to compare ourselves to our peers to secure our place in the tribe, aren't we essentially fighting our own evolution when we try to sit down and save money?
That is a profound realization. And in many ways, yes, you absolutely are.
Wow.
Evolutionary biology heavily prioritized immediate consumption. In a resource-scarce environment, say, hunting and gathering on the savanna, storing calories or resources for a distant future that might never arrive was a terrible survival strategy.
Because it could go bad or get stolen.
Exactly. If you found food, you consumed it. Saving money for a retirement that is 3 decades away requires a level of abstract, long-term conceptual thinking that our ancient brains are simply not optimized for.
That makes so much sense.
We are actively asking a brain, built for immediate day-to-day survival, to patiently manage a 30-year compounding investment portfolio.
Which makes it so clear why this is so difficult for everyone.
It really does.
So if our biology pushes us so strongly toward immediate consumption, how do the few people who actually build real wealth overcome it?
Good question.
According to our sources, it requires a fundamental, almost philosophical shift in how we perceive time itself.
And this brings us to a deeply analytical and economic concept found in the Mises Institute text.
Right.
Time preference. This is a crucial foundational framework for understanding all financial behavior.
Okay, let's break that down.
Time preference refers to how heavily you weight the present moment versus the future. A person with a high time preference places a heavy premium on instant satisfaction.
They want the reward right now, today.
Exactly. A person with a low time preference is willing to delay their consumption in the present to save, invest, and build for a much greater reward in the future.
And the Mises text goes remarkably deep on this.
It really does.
It goes so far as to argue that low time preference isn't just a personal finance trick. It is the literal foundation of capital accumulation, which in turn is the foundation of civilization and entrepreneurship. You cannot build a business or construct a house or develop a society without someone being willing to delay their immediate gratification.
Right, consuming their resources today and pooling them for a larger future goal.
Precisely. The willingness to wait is the engine of progress. And if we tie this back to Naval Ravikant's philosophy from earlier, he explicitly advises people to play iterated games. He notes that all returns in life, whether we're talking about financial wealth, the depth of your relationships, or the accumulation of knowledge, come from compound interest.
And compound interest is simply the mathematical manifestation of low time preference.
Yes, and the math of compound interest is where the quiet magic actually happens. The LibreText's source illustrates this beautifully. Time is the quiet multiplier. It doesn't scream for attention like a high salary does.
No, it's silent.
They point out that a person earning $60,000 who adopts a low time preference and invests 20% of their income consistently over decades will easily and dramatically outperform a person making $150,000 who has a high time preference and only saves 2%.
It's all about the time in the market.
Right. They introduced the Rule of 72, which is a simple mental model estimating how long it takes an investment to double by dividing the number 72 by the annual interest rate.
Yeah, it's a great trick.
It shows how aggressively time rewards those who can simply sit still and delay consumption.
However, the Mises Institute text also offers a very specific cautionary perspective on what happens when a society structurally discourages low time preference.
This was a really interesting part of the reading.
The source discusses a theory of decivilization, arguing that inflation in fiat money economies can actively erode the purchasing power of savings.
Okay.
From the distinct perspective of this text, when a government inflates the money supply, it actively punishes the low time preference individuals who have dutifully saved their money.
Because those savings steadily lose their value.
Exactly. The text argues this inevitably pushes society back toward high time preference behaviors. People realize their money is losing value sitting in a bank, so they spend it immediately on consumer goods before prices rise even further.
I think it's important to note that this is the specific economic and philosophical viewpoint of the Mises source, analyzing the relationship between government monetary policy and human behavior.
Right, that is their specific lens.
But taking that perspective into account and looking at it through the lens of human behavior, I have to ask.
Go ahead.
It's easy to preach the virtues of delayed gratification, but if a listener is in an environment where grocery prices are skyrocketing and their cash savings are actively losing value due to inflation, isn't adopting a high time preference, spending it now before it loses more value, actually a deeply rational survival response?
Well, from a purely immediate behavioral standpoint, you can certainly see the logic in that reaction.
Yeah.
If the macroeconomic environment makes the future feel precarious or makes holding cash demonstrably punitive, human behavior will naturally, almost fluidly adapt to prioritize the present.
Right.
That is exactly the behavioral shift the Mises text is observing how systemic factors alter daily incentives.
Okay, I see.
However, the financial planning texts counter this by emphasizing a critical distinction. While holding fiat cash during high inflation is indeed detrimental to your wealth, investing in assets that appreciate or generate yield like equities or real estate is how you maintain a low time preference even in an inflationary environment.
So you don't just hold the cash.
Exactly. The mechanism changes from simply saving cash under a mattress to deliberately acquiring assets.
Got it.
But the core principle of delaying your personal consumption to build future stability remains the only reliable path to wealth.
Okay, so the vehicle changes, but the destination and the rigorous mindset required to get there stays exactly the same.
Exactly.
So let's look at the practical reality of this. If a person actually manages to master this low time preference, if they successfully navigate around lifestyle inflation and step off the hedonic treadmill, what does their daily life actually look like? Because the reality presented in our sources is surprisingly, almost shockingly mundane.
It is profoundly mundane, which is exactly why it is so rarely emulated or celebrated on social media.
Right. No one's posting this.
Exactly. To explore this, we turn to the classic findings from the book The Millionaire Next Door, as summarized in The Dad is Fire Source.
Yes.
The primary finding is a complete data-driven debunking of the societal stereotype of the wealthy. The typical millionaire does not live in a gated luxury neighborhood, and they certainly do not drive exotic sports cars.
The source provides the wealth formula from that book, which is fascinating to calculate for yourself.
It's a great benchmark.
It says your expected net worth should equal your age multiplied by your pre-tax annual income divided by 10.
Okay, so let's do the math.
Right. So if you are a 40-year-old making $100,000 a year, you should have a baseline net worth of $400,000. But the author of the article points out how absolutely brutal this benchmark is to hit if you are relying solely on a heavily taxed W-2 salary to get there.
It's almost impossible.
It loops right back to Naval's initial point. You cannot get there just by renting your time. You need your money to make money.
And the people who actually hit that formula practice what the source calls stealth wealth.
Stealth wealth.
True wealth is largely invisible. It is driving a second-hand, highly reliable car like a Toyota Camry for 15 years.
Right.
It is shopping at standard discount stores without a second thought. It is actively, almost religiously, avoiding depreciating assets.
Wow.
They are frugal, not necessarily because they have to be to survive, but because they deeply understand the opportunity cost of capital.
What do you mean by that?
Every single dollar spent on a depreciating luxury item is a dollar that cannot be deployed into a compounding asset. They see the future value of the dollar, not just its present purchasing power.
The personal reflection from the dad as FIRE author really brought this abstract concept down to earth for me.
Or the price per use concept.
Yes. He calculates the price per use of the items in his life. He gives the highly relatable example of skipping the $3 add-on for bacon on a cheeseburger at a restaurant.
I loved this part.
Right. Now, he is a wealthy man. He can easily afford the $3, but he calculates that the bacon only provides $1 of actual lasting happiness to his meal. So it is mathematically a bad psychological trade.
Exactly.
Or taking it to a larger scale, he talks about avoiding buying a Porsche. He says a $100,000 Porsche won't make him $100,000 happier. It might only provide a fleeting $15,000 worth of joy.
And that specific kind of internal calculation is the exact opposite of the hedonic treadmill we discussed earlier.
Right.
Instead of letting consumption escalate unconsciously, stealth wealth practitioners are intensely, almost ruthlessly conscious of the actual psychological return on their spending.
It's so deliberate.
And what they consistently find is that the return on luxury goods is incredibly low compared to the return on freedom, autonomy, and security.
Wow.
When you don't look rich, you successfully avoid the heavy social tax of expectations. As the author notes, people don't automatically expect you to pick up the expensive dinner check, and you don't attract constant, uncomfortable financial requests from acquaintances.
Let's linger on that for a second. Is the ultimate luxury actually invisibility?
It really might be.
It seems like the greatest, most valuable thing money can buy is the absolute freedom from having to perform your success for other people.
That is a profound way to look at it, and it aligns perfectly with the psychology of wealth.
Yeah.
Yes, the invisibility provides an impenetrable barrier against the social comparison trap. If you refuse to play the status game, which, remember, Naval defined as your place in the visual social hierarchy, you are not forced to spend your hard-earned wealth defending that status.
That makes total sense.
You are building the autonomy to live life entirely on your own terms, completely free from the exhausting requirement of external validation.
It is incredibly freeing to think about, but it also brings up a major complication.
Okay, what's that?
Up to this point, you and I have been looking exclusively at the individual. We've talked about the individual brain's dopamine response, individual time preference, individual stealth wealth.
Right.
But human behavior gets exponentially more complicated when you merge your finances with a partner or when you try to raise children.
Oh, it really does. Money does not exist in a vacuum. It exists within the delicate, often volatile ecosystem of human relationships. The LiberTexts chapter on marriage, children, and money provides excellent, deeply empathetic research on this exact dynamic.
It was a fascinating read.
It starts by highlighting how our family of origin experiences silently shape our unconscious attitudes toward money long before we ever merge bank accounts.
Right.
They use the incredibly common case study of Sarah and Mike. Sarah grew up in a family with strict, unforgiving budgets where every single dollar was tracked out of necessity.
Okay.
Mike grew up in a family that spent freely, carried debt, and took a much more relaxed, perhaps avoidant, approach to money.
When Sarah and Mike get married, the psychological friction is immediate and intense.
Oh, totally.
Let's say Mike buys a new video game system without discussing it first. Sarah sees that Amazon box on the porch and feels instantly terrified. Her childhood trauma flares up, and she wants to aggressively track and approve all future spending to feel secure.
Right. It's about safety.
Mike, on the other hand, feels controlled, parented, and suffocated by her reaction. They aren't just arguing about the $300 price tag of a gaming console. They are arguing about what money fundamentally represents to them based on their childhoods.
Exactly. You are identifying the emotional core of financial conflict. For one partner, hoarding cash might be the only way they feel safe in the world.
Yeah.
For the other partner, spontaneously spending money might be the only way they feel free or successful. When those two deeply entrenched worldviews inevitably collide, it is explosive.
So what's the solution?
Well, this is why the source introduces highly practical communication tools like the HALT principle.
HALT. Let's talk about that.
It advises couples to never, under any circumstances, discuss finances when they are hungry, angry, lonely, or tired.
Hungry, angry, lonely, tired, HALT. I love that.
Right. Financial discussions require immense executive function and empathy, and those four physical states severely, almost biologically, impair our ability to think rationally and listen to our partner.
The research they present on the health of marriages is incredibly revealing, too.
It is.
They note that materialism, which they define as placing a disproportionately high priority on acquiring physical goods, actually negatively impacts overall marital satisfaction.
It literally erodes connection.
Right. On the flip side, total financial transparency is one of the highest predictors of relationship trust. Keeping financial secrets, even small ones, or practicing what they call financial infidelity, fundamentally damages the core architecture of the partnership.
And this relational dynamic doesn't stop with a couple. It extends directly to parenting.
Ah, yes. The kids.
The source details how to deliberately pass healthy financial behaviors onto children by understanding the concept of the escalating cost of mistakes.
This was such a good point.
The philosophy here is to let children fail financially when the stakes are incredibly low. You let a preschooler waste their entire $3 weekly allowance on a piece of candy they drop in the dirt, and you let them experience the raw, unfiltered regret of having no money left.
As hard as that is to watch as a parent.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You let a teenager mismanage their monthly cell phone data and deal with the social consequences of being cut off.
Because if you swoop in and rescue them, if you don't let them make a $3 mistake when they are 5 years old, you are setting them up to make a $30,000 mistake with high-interest credit cards when they are 25. Early, safe financial education shapes lifelong behavioral habits.
Absolutely.
But bringing it back to the couple for a moment, when two people, like Sarah and Mike, have totally different money personalities inherited from their childhoods, how do they actually find a middle ground without one person feeling like they are sacrificing their core identity?
The LibreText's research offers beautiful insight here. It suggests that the solution is not finding a cold mathematical compromise where they just split the difference on the budget.
Okay, so it's not just math.
No, rather, they must shift the focus to shared values. The text emphasizes that financial change requires holistic behavioral change, not just an increase in household income. Couples must sit down and explicitly articulate what money means to their unique family unit, entirely independent of the families they grew up in.
Wow.
They have to collaboratively create a new, shared financial mission statement. When spending decisions are evaluated against these new shared goals, rather than weaponized against each other's childhood anxieties, the conflict reduces significantly.
So we have seen the psychological traps of the hedonic treadmill. We've explored the deep friction that happens in relationships. And we've discussed the underlying philosophy of time preference.
We've covered a lot.
How do you practically apply all this knowledge to your daily life? How do you finally stop the exhausting cycle of starting over that we talked about at the very beginning of the deep dive?
To answer that, we synthesized the practical structural frameworks from the Ledger Theory and the Starting Over book.
Okay.
The foundational premise of both these texts is beautifully simple. Human willpower is fundamentally unreliable.
It is a depleting resource.
Yes. You cannot rely on raw delayed gratification alone to fight off present bias, targeted marketing, and social comparison every single day of your life.
It's just too much.
The cognitive load is simply too high. You will eventually fail. Therefore, you need structural pre-commitment.
Pre-commitment, meaning you make the difficult financial decision once in advance before the temptation even exists.
Exactly.
The primary solution the sources point to here is automation. And the very old, very true adage of paying yourself first.
Classic advice for a reason.
Right. The source argues that your investing and saving must happen automatically the exact moment your paycheck clears before the money ever hits your primary checking account. If you wait to see what is left over at the end of the month to invest, present bias practically guarantees there will be absolutely nothing left.
Precisely. By automating the transfer of wealth to your investments or savings, you remove the flawed human decision-making process entirely.
You take yourself out of the equation.
You are artificially constraining your visible cash flow to force your brain to adapt to a lower spending level. It is a structural hack against your own psychology.
That's brilliant.
The ledger theory also introduces a very practical, highly effective tool called the 13 Raise Rule, specifically designed to combat lifestyle inflation over the course of a career.
I love this rule because it is so incredibly realistic. It doesn't demand total asceticism. It acknowledges that people naturally want to enjoy the fruits of their hard work.
Yeah, you have to live your life.
When your income increases, say you get a $9,000 raise, the rule says you immediately allocate 1/3 to savings or investments,
Right.
1/3 to a visible lifestyle upgrade so you feel the reward, and 1/3 to debt reduction or building cash reserves. It structurally allows for the psychological reward of a raise without succumbing to total 100% lifestyle inflation.
Exactly.
They get to upgrade your life, but your underlying wealth is still compounding in the background.
It is a brilliant framework of controlled, deliberate expansion rather than unconscious creep. Furthermore, the texts heavily emphasize the critical importance of actively shifting your reference anchors.
Reference anchors.
Yeah, if social comparison is biologically hardwired into us, as we established earlier, then we must be fiercely protective of who we are comparing ourselves to.
Oh, I see.
The actionable advice is to actively curate the media you consume and the social circles you observe to normalize saving, investing, and financial peace, rather than normalizing constant, exhausting consumption.
So you are intentionally changing your peer group, even if it's just the accounts you follow online, to people who actively practice stealth wealth.
Yes. Financial independence is ultimately, mathematically, solely a function of the gap between your income and your expenditure.
Right.
It is not about the absolute number of your salary. It is entirely about the size of that gap. By creating automated, pre-committed systems, you protect the gap. You remove the heavy emotional burden of having to make the right financial choice every single day.
It makes me think of an airline pilot running through a pre-flight checklist.
Oh, good analogy.
They don't rely on their memory, their mood, or their willpower on any given Tuesday to ensure the plane is safe to fly. They rely on a strict, predetermined, automated system.
Exactly.
By automating our finances, we take the decision-making out of the moment of temptation. So in a strange way, creating strict financial systems and rules actually frees up our emotional energy rather than restricting our lives.
Absolutely. The system carries the cognitive load so you don't have to. When your savings and investments are securely automated, you are entirely free to spend whatever is left in your checking account without guilt, without anxiety, and without constantly fighting your own psychology.
Wow.
True financial freedom is not just having a pile of money. It is having systems that manage the money seamlessly so you don't have to constantly think about it.
This has been an incredible journey through the hidden mechanics of money and human behavior.
It really has.
Yeah.
To summarize what we have gently explored today, money is ultimately a mirror. Yeah. It reflects our relationship with time, our innate susceptibility to social comparison, and our deepest, often unconscious behavioral habits learned from childhood. Understanding these invisible forces rather than just tracking numbers on a spreadsheet is the only sustainable way to break the cycle of starting over.
And it reminds you that true financial stability isn't about finally landing that perfect, high-paying job.
No, it isn't.
It's about consciously stepping off the hedonic treadmill, embracing a low time preference to build your future, and fiercely protecting the gap between what you earn and what you keep. If true wealth is actually stealthy, and the real millionaire next door is practically invisible by design, does that mean society's entire visual language of success is pointing us in the exact opposite direction of actual freedom?
It's something to think about.
Tomorrow, look around. What if the most genuinely successful person you pass on the street is the one who looks like they have absolutely nothing to prove?